Black Bart, gentleman pirate of the high seas. Kerry Clark, part of the Heinous History short stories series available as audio stories on the Heinous History YouTube channel. Black Bart, he wore lace cuffs, carried 4 pistols, and built the deadliest pirate empire the Royal Navy couldn't ignore, until they did. Chapter 1. The Atlantic sun fell mercilessly on the deck of the Royal Fortune. Sweat trickled down the necks of the crew, but not a drop dared appear on the immaculate brow of Captain Bartholomew Roberts. He stood ramrods straight on the quarterdeck, his crimson waistcoat glowing like fresh blood against the weathered timbers of his vessel. "Mr. Scudamore," Roberts called, his voice carrying the crisp accent of his Welsh homeland, rather than the rough growl of a common seaman. "Perhaps you might explain why you're drinking rum before the noon hour." The quartermaster swayed slightly, clutching a half-empty bottle. Dark patches of sweat stained his filthy shirt, and his attempt to stand straight only made his drunkenness more obvious. "Captain, it's hot as the devil's own kitchen, begging your pardon." Roberts didn't blink. The crew nearby stopped their work, watching. The only sounds were the creaking of the ship and the soft flutter of the sails. "Is that meant to be an explanation or an excuse?" Roberts asked, adjusting the delicate lace cuffs that peeked from his coat sleeves. Each had been carefully laundered that very morning by a terrified cabin boy. "Because neither satisfies the articles we all agreed upon." Behind him came the sharp crack of the whip as another sailor received punishment, 40 lashes for stealing from the shared treasury as set down in their written code. "Discipline," Roberts continued, his voice carrying across the silent deck. "He's what separates us from common sea rats. We are a democratic vessel." His mouth curled into what might have been a smile. "And the democracy has voted for order." The whip continued its rhythm. Scudamore glanced nervously at the 4 gleaming pistols strapped across Robert's chest in a silk sling. They weren't ordinary pirate weapons, but then, nothing about Black Bart was ordinary. "I'm sorry, Captain," Scudamore mumbled, knowing better than to argue. "Won't happen again." "Indeed it won't." Roberts took the bottle from the man's trembling fingers. 2 days of water rations for you, and you'll sleep on deck." As Scudamore shuffled away, Roberts surveyed his domain. The Royal Fortune carried 42 guns and over 100 men, cutthroats and deserters, yes, but his cutthroats and deserters, all following his rules, with regular meetings and fair profit-sharing. Roberts uncorked the rum bottle and poured the contents overboard in an amber stream. What a waste. Not the rum that was swill, but the time spent correcting grown men who couldn't follow simple rules. The boatswain approached, touching his forehead with respect. "Flogging's done, Captain. 39 stripes delivered." "The agreement was 40, Roberts replied quietly. "Deliver the 40th, or receive it yourself." The man paled. "Aye, Captain." As the final lash was given, Roberts straightened his black cravat and adjusted his powdered wig, ignoring the way sweat trickled beneath it. A gentleman maintained standards, even in the blistering heat of the equator. He gazed across the endless blue horizon. Somewhere out there floated merchant ships, heavy with Spanish gold and Portuguese silks. And somewhere, the Royal Navy hunted for the most successful pirate of the age. Roberts smiled thinly. Let them come. They'd find a man of principles. They'd find Black Bart. Chapter 2. Bartholomew Roberts had never wanted a pirate's life. What he had wanted was order in a harsh world, structure, clear paths to success based on ability rather than birth. The irony that he'd found these things among pirates was not lost on him. Standing in his cabin, mapping their course toward the African Gold Coast, Roberts remembered the day everything changed. It was May 1719, and he'd been second mate aboard the Princess, a slave ship under Captain Abraham Plum, a dull man whose only qualification seemed to be following company orders without question. They had anchored off the coast to purchase slaves when the pirate ship Rover appeared on the horizon. The princess had guns but no courage. They surrendered immediately. The pirate captain, Howell Davis, had seen something in Roberts. Perhaps it was his navigational skills. Perhaps his strict self-discipline. Most likely it was that Roberts remained perfectly dressed, even as the rest of the crew trembled in fear. "You've got the look of a man who knows his worth," Davis had said. "Join us, or die with the others." Roberts remembered his exact reply. "If I must be a pirate, sir, I shall endeavor to excel at it." Davis had laughed. The crew had laughed. They wouldn't be laughing now. Within 6 weeks, Davis was dead. He'd been betrayed by Portuguese officials during a raid. The pirate crew, suddenly leaderless, had done something remarkable. They'd elected Roberts captain despite his being the newest member. "He looks the part," he'd overheard one sailor say. Like a proper captain from a painting. They'd chosen him for his appearance. They'd kept him for his results. Roberts studied the charts before him. In the 18 months since taking command, he'd captured over 400 ships. He'd outfoxed the Royal Navy repeatedly. He'd created a floating kingdom more efficient than any trading company. And he'd done it all without a drop of rum passing between his lips. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," Roberts said without looking up. Young Tommy Parker slipped inside. Barely 17, with wispy facial hair he insisted on calling a beard. "Beg pardon, Captain. The men are asking about the new rules. Some concerns being voiced." "Concerns?" Roberts finally looked up, fixing the boy with a stare that had made hardened killers step back. Tommy swallowed hard. "Just wondering if all 42 articles are, necessary. Particularly the one about lights out at 8 bells and no gambling whatsoever." "I see," Roberts straightened. "And who precisely is voicing these concerns?" "Nobody in particular, sir. Just general mumblings. Tell me, Tommy, did we not agree to these articles by vote? Was there not a show of hands with all men present?" "Yes, Captain, but democracy, Tommy, requires following the rules even when inconvenient. Otherwise it's just mob rule." Roberts folded his charts with precise movements. "We joined together for gold, did we not? Gold requires discipline. Discipline requires rules." Tommy shifted uncomfortably. "We joined for gold, sir. Not endless rules. Some of the men say Captain Davis never. Davis is dead." Robert's voice remained calm, but Tommy flinched. "And had he imposed proper discipline, perhaps he wouldn't be. You're dismissed." After Tommy left, Roberts returned to his charts, but his thoughts were disturbed. The boy wasn't wrong. The crew had initially signed on for riches and freedom, the very things their previous lives had denied them. Most were desperate men escaping impressment, debtor's prison, or starvation wages. What they didn't understand was that true freedom required structure. Without it, they'd descend into drunken chaos, easy prey for any naval frigate that spotted them. Roberts traced his finger along the coastline of Africa, west to the Caribbean, then north to the American colonies. Those would be their hunting grounds. He'd teach them order. He'd make them wealthy. And any man who couldn't accept both conditions was welcome to leave, preferably by walking the plank. Chapter 3. The entire crew had assembled on the main deck by noon, squinting in the fierce sunlight. Roberts stood before them, immaculate in his fine clothes despite the heat, a document unfurled in his gloved hands. "Gentlemen," he began, "I have revised our articles of agreement to ensure the success of our enterprise. They will be posted on the ship's mast and enforced without exception." A murmur rippled through the assembled pirates. Roberts ignored it. Article 1. Every man has a vote in affairs of moment. All disputes shall be settled by majority vote. He paused. "Unless I deem the matter to affect essential operations, in which case my decision stands." The muttering grew louder. Article 2. Every man shall have an equal share in all provisions and strong drink, as I allocate. His voice rose. Article 3. No person shall game at cards or dice for money. Article 4. The lights and candles are to be put out at 8 o'clock at night. If any of the crew desire to drink after such hour, they shall do it on the open deck. He continued through all 42 articles, each more specific than the last, ending with his favorite, no boy or woman to be allowed amongst us. If any man be found seducing a woman and carrying her to sea, death shall be his punishment. As he finished, Roberts gazed across the sea of weathered faces. These are not suggestions, gentlemen. They are law, our law. Are there any objections? Of course, there were objections, but no one dared voice them, not after what happened to Smith last month. Only burly Nathaniel Hayes, the gunner, raised his hand. Captain, with respect, what of Article 36? No man to talk of breaking up until each has a share of £1,000. We've taken prizes worth far more, yet we continue to sail. Roberts nodded approvingly at the question. A fair point, Mr. Hayes. Consider the article amended. No man to talk of breaking up until I determine operations have reached sufficient scale. The goal, gentlemen, is not merely wealth, but lasting wealth. Like the bloody East India Company, someone muttered from the back. Robert's eyes narrowed, searching for the speaker. Indeed. Though we share our profits more fairly, do we not? Now, to demonstrate our commitment to these articles. He gestured, and 2 crewmen dragged forward a miserable figure. Samuel Dobbs, perpetually drunk and perpetually in trouble. Mr. Dobbs was discovered drinking rum while on watch duty last night, Roberts announced. Article 19 clearly states, sobriety while on duty shall be maintained at all times. Dobbs struggled weakly. It was just a sip, Captain, to ward off the night chill. The temperature was 25 degrees, Mr. Dobbs. Roberts sighed, as if disappointed in a child. The article specifies the punishment as hanging from the yardarm. A shocked silence fell over the crew. Even for Roberts, this seemed extreme. Young Tommy stepped forward. Captain, perhaps a flogging instead? He's a good hand when sober. When is he ever sober? Roberts countered. No, the articles must be enforced as written. We agreed upon them democratically, did we not? Tommy looked around desperately, but no one else would meet his eye. Everyone remembered Smith. Roberts nodded to the boatswain. Proceed. They hanged Dobbs right there, the crew watching in stunned silence as he kicked and struggled before finally going still. Roberts observed with clinical detachment, occasionally checking his pocket watch. When it was done, he addressed the crew again. Let this serve as a reminder that our success depends on order. Dismissed. As the pirates dispersed, Roberts caught Tommy's horrified gaze. The boy looked away quickly, but not before Roberts saw the fear and disgust. Later that evening, Hayes approached Roberts on the quarterdeck. Captain, the men are unsettled. Dobbs was well liked. Dobbs was a liability, Roberts replied, watching the stars emerge. One weak link endangers the entire operation. Hayes scratched his beard. Perhaps. But they're saying you've changed since we took that Portuguese galleon. Too much gold. Too quickly. Roberts turned, his expression unchanged. Are they plotting mutiny, Mr. Hayes? No, Hayes said quickly. No mutiny, just concern. Then, their concern is noted. Roberts adjusted his cuffs. Tell them this. I don't expect them to understand my methods, only to follow them. The alternative is what awaits most pirates. Poverty, capture, an ignoble hanging. He smiled thinly. At least Dobbs died among his shipmates. Hayes nodded reluctantly and left. Roberts remained on deck long after, watching the moonlight on the waves. His fingers traced the ornate gold cross hanging from his neck, plunder from a bishop's cabin, worth a small fortune. Order meant survival. Control meant power, and if his crew resented him for enforcing both, so be it. Better to be feared than forgotten. Far below decks, in the cramped crew quarters, Tommy Parker whispered to his bunkmate. "We signed on for gold, not bloody curfews." "Quiet," the older pirate hissed. "Walls have ears." "He's getting worse," Tommy insisted. "It always starts with rules. Then comes the madness." "Then pray we get rich before the madness wins," the man replied, rolling over to end the conversation. Tommy stared into the darkness, remembering Dobbs' kicking feet. The captain was efficient, true, terrifyingly so. But something was changing inside the man, something important, and Tommy couldn't shake the feeling they were all going down with him. Chapter 4. "Bow your heads," Roberts commanded, standing on top of a makeshift platform constructed from stolen shipping crates. The crew of the Royal Fortune complied, some more reluctantly than others. Sunday service had become mandatory 3 months ago, all because of Article 23 in the ever-expanding Pirate Code. Roberts adjusted the ornate bishop's mitre perched atop his powdered wig. The golden headdress, stolen during the raid on a Spanish missionary vessel, caught the morning sunlight in dazzling flashes. "We gather today," Roberts intoned, "not as sinners before God, but as men of principle before the vastness of fate." The pirates shifted uncomfortably. Most hadn't set foot in a church since childhood, and those who had usually did so while robbing it. "Principles," Roberts continued, "are what separate us from common thieves. We are not marauders, but men of fortune. Not rabble, but revolutionaries against a corrupt system that would see us starve while noblemen grow fat." His voice rose, carrying across the deck. "We take what the world owes us, but we do it with order, with purpose, with discipline." In the back row, Hayes leaned toward Tommy Parker. "Does he believe any of this religious nonsense?" Tommy shrugged. "Don't think so. Says it keeps the men behaved, though." Roberts's sharp eyes caught the exchange. "Mr. Hayes, Mr. Parker, perhaps you'd like to share your spiritual insights with the congregation." Both men straightened. "No, Captain," they answered together. "Excellent. Then we'll continue." Roberts opened a leather-bound Bible, another prize from the missionary ship. Today's text comes from Exodus, the part where Moses delivers the commandments. Rules, gentlemen, even God understood their necessity. For 20 minutes, Roberts preached about divine order, while the sun shone down mercilessly. Several men swayed on their feet, close to fainting in the windless morning. "And now," Roberts concluded, "we have business to attend to." He removed the mitre, handing it to his cabin boy. "Bring forth the prisoners." 3 bound men were dragged before the platform, the captain, and officers of a Dutch merchant vessel they'd captured the previous day. The ship itself was being sailed alongside by a prize crew. "Captain Willem van Houten," Roberts addressed the oldest prisoner, "your cargo of sugar and spice is now the property of this company. Your crew has elected to join us. The question remains, what shall we do with you?" The Dutch captain spat on the deck. "Filthy pirate." Roberts sighed. Unimaginative response. "I was hoping for wittier last words." He turned to the crew. "Gentlemen, shall we extend our professional courtesy to Captain Van Houten and his officers?" A roar went up from the pirates. "Walk the plank! Walk the plank!" Roberts held up a gloved hand for silence. "Democracy has spoken, Captain. The traditional nautical dismissal for you." As the prisoners were led to the plank extending over the ship's side, Roberts resumed his place at the helm, exchanging the mitre for his wide-brimmed hat adorned with a crimson feather. Hayes joined him, frowning at the proceedings. "Captain, I've been meaning to discuss this business with the Dutchman. We had an offer of alliance from Captain Vane last month. His crew would have helped us take twice as many prizes." "Charles Vane?" Robert's nose wrinkled with distaste. "The man runs his ship like a floating tavern. No discipline, no strategy. But more guns, Hayes countered, and he controls the shipping lanes from Jamaica too. I will not ally with lesser operations, Roberts interrupted. It diminishes our standing. Our standing? Hayes blinked in confusion. Our reputation, Mr. Hayes. Merchants surrender to us not merely because of our guns, but because of who we are. Efficient, principled, deadly when necessary. Below them, the first Dutch officer walked the plank, prodded by cutlasses. His scream ended in a distant splash. We're pirates, sir, Hayes said carefully. Not the Royal Navy. Roberts turned to face his gunner fully. Precisely why we must exceed their standards in every respect. Do you think I enjoy these displays? He gestured toward the plank. They are necessary tools of intimidation. Our reputation travels faster than our sails. Another scream. Another splash. Captain Van Houten was last, standing at the edge of the plank with surprising dignity. So it's fear you're after, Hayes said quietly. Fear, Roberts agreed, is the most efficient motivator for our enemies and our own crew. His cold eyes flicked to Hayes. Something to remember, Mr. Hayes. Van Houten jumped rather than be pushed, denying the pirates their final moment of power. Roberts nodded approvingly. Good man, he murmured. Professional to the end. Throughout the day, Roberts supervised the transfer of cargo from the Dutch vessel, meticulously recording each item in his ledger. Everything would be divided according to the articles, after Roberts took his captain's share. By sunset, the operation was complete, and the Dutch ship was sunk with well-aimed cannon fire. Roberts retired to his cabin earlier than usual that night. The truth, which he admitted only to himself, was that the constant vigilance exhausted him. Maintaining order among thieves and murderers required perpetual alertness, an eternal performance of control. He removed his wig, revealing close-cropped dark hair, and washed his face in a basin of fresh water. In the small mirror mounted on the cabin wall, he examined himself. Still youthful at 39, but with new lines etching themselves around his eyes. A knock interrupted his rare moment of vulnerability. Enter, he called, quickly replacing the wig. Tommy Parker appeared, holding a sealed message. Signal from the lookout ship, Captain. Royal Navy squadron spotted near Principe Island. 3 warships. Roberts took the message, breaking the seal. Interesting. They're being quite persistent. The men are worried, Tommy ventured. 3 warships against our 2. The men are always worried about something, Roberts replied dismissively. If not the Navy, then bad omens or women aboard or some other superstitious nonsense. He scanned the message. Warships move slowly. We'll be gone before they arrive. Tommy hesitated. There's talk of yellow fever in the ports there. There's always talk of something, Mr. Parker. Roberts folded the message precisely. Dismissed. After the boy left, Roberts sat at his desk and opened his journal. In meticulous handwriting, he recorded the day's events, adding another page to his legacy. He was aware of the stories already spreading about Black Bart, the legendary pirate who dressed like nobility, who never touched alcohol, who ran his ship like a royal flagship. It was a legacy worth nurturing, worth dying for, even. But not yet. There were more ships to take, more rules to enforce, more order to impose on a chaotic world. Roberts closed the journal and locked it carefully in his desk drawer. Then he did something he'd started doing recently. Laid out his crimson waistcoat and black breeches for the morning, placed his 4 pistols within easy reach, and went to sleep fully dressed, except for his boots. Just in case. Chapter 5. The Portuguese merchantman surrendered without firing a shot. Its captain had recognized the Royal Fortune immediately. The crimson flag with a skeleton holding an hourglass was unmistakable. Black Bart's calling card. A wise decision, Roberts told the terrified Portuguese captain as he came aboard. Resistance would have been inefficient. The Portuguese vessel was a rich prize, textiles, sugar, and a chest of gold coins bound for the slave trading posts along the Guinea coast. Roberts supervised the transfer of cargo personally, checking each item against the ship's manifest. "Captain," Hayes called from below decks, "you'd better come see this." Roberts followed his gunner down to the cargo hold. The stench hit him first, a miasma of sickness and human waste. In the dim light, he saw them, dozens of enslaved Africans chained together in the cramped space. Many appeared ill, their bodies slick with sweat, despite the relative coolness of the hold. "Slave ship," Hayes said unnecessarily. "But something's wrong. They're sick." Roberts stepped closer, examining the nearest man. Yellow-tinged eyes stared back at him from a face shining with fever sweat. "Yellow fever," Roberts muttered, stepping back quickly. "Seal the hold. No one goes in or out." Hayes blanched. "But Captain, we can't just leave them." "That's precisely what we can and will do," Roberts interrupted. "Yellow fever spreads like wildfire aboard ships. We'll take the merchandise from the upper decks and be on our way." "These are people, Captain," Hayes insisted. Roberts fixed him with an icy stare. "They're a liability, Mr. Hayes, like Dobbs was." The comparison hung in the air between them. After a moment, Hayes looked away. "Aye, Captain." Roberts returned to deck and ordered an abbreviated version of the usual plundering. Within hours, they were underway again, the Portuguese ship shrinking in the distance. "What about the slave ship, Captain?" Tommy asked as they set sail. "Should we report it when we reach port?" "We are not in the reporting business, Mr. Parker," Roberts replied coolly. "And we will not be discussing what we saw. Fear spreads like disease." 3 days later, the first man fell ill. It was Cooper, one of the men who'd helped inventory the Portuguese cargo. By evening, he was delirious with fever. By morning, he was dead. Roberts ordered the body wrapped and thrown overboard without ceremony. The man clearly had a weakness for illness, he announced to the gathered crew. "Nothing to concern ourselves with." But 2 more men showed symptoms by sunset. Then 4 more. Roberts ordered the decks scrubbed with vinegar, a practice he'd read about in a naval medicine manual. He instituted mandatory hand washing with lye soap before meals. He separated the obviously sick from the seemingly healthy. None of it worked. On the 8th day, as Roberts held his daily meeting with the ship's officers, Tommy Parker collapsed mid-report. His boyish face was already yellowing, his eyes bloodshot. "Get him below," Roberts ordered without rising from his chair. When no one moved immediately, he looked up sharply. "Now." Hayes and the others carried Tommy out. Roberts continued the meeting as if nothing had happened, discussing their course toward the Caribbean, where they would rendezvous with their sister ship, the Good Fortune. When Hayes returned alone, he didn't sit. "He's in a bad way, Captain. Like the others." "I see." Roberts made a notation in his logbook. "We'll need a replacement for his duties." Hayes stared incredulously. "A replacement? There are 17 men sick now, 5 dead. This isn't a matter of reassigning duties." "What would you suggest, Mr. Hayes?" Roberts asked with dangerous calm. "Shall we all wail and tear our hair? Perhaps a group prayer to ward off illness? We need to make port, find a doctor, and alert the authorities to our presence?" "Excellent strategy." Roberts closed his logbook. "No. We continue as planned. The weak will perish, the strong will survive. Natural law, Mr. Hayes." "Natural law?" Hayes' voice rose. "There's nothing natural about leaving men to die without care." Roberts stood slowly. Despite being shorter than Hayes, he somehow seemed to loom over the larger man. "Be very careful with your next words, Mr. Hayes. They may be taken as encouragement to mutiny." The gunner's fists clenched, but he controlled himself. "No mutiny, Captain. Just concern for the men." "Your concern is noted." Roberts sat back down. "Now, about the provisions inventory." The meeting continued, but something fundamental had changed. The pretense of democratic piracy had finally been stripped away, revealing the cold machinery beneath. Roberts was becoming something else. That night, for the first time since taking command, Roberts slept poorly. He'd convinced himself that superior hygiene would protect him, from disease at least, but not from the growing awareness of shifting loyalties aboard his ship. He kept a loaded pistol under his pillow and woke at every creak of the timbers. In the morning, he emerged fully dressed, his wig perfectly powdered, his waistcoat immaculate. If the men saw any sign of weakness, any crack in his facade, all would be lost. 8 more had fallen ill overnight. 3 had died, including the ship's cook. Roberts ordered the bodies thrown overboard without ceremony, then addressed the remaining healthy crew. "Gentlemen, we find ourselves facing temporary adversity," he announced, standing on the quarterdeck like an admiral addressing his fleet. "But adversity is the forge of greatness. Those who survive this trial will be stronger for it." The men stared back with hollow eyes. Many had lost friends. All feared they would be next. "I have decided," Roberts continued, "that we will adjust our course to meet the good fortune. Together, we will replenish our crew and continue operations." No cheer went up. No murmur of approval. Just silent, fearful acceptance. As Roberts turned away, he heard someone whispering a prayer. He ignored it. Just this once. 3 days later, they spotted the Portuguese slave ship again, adrift on the current. No movement was visible on its decks. "Ghost ship," one sailor muttered. Roberts studied it through his spyglass. No, merely abandoned. The crew must have succumbed or fled in boats. "And the slaves?" Hayes asked. Roberts lowered the glass. "Almost certainly dead." Hayes's expression darkened. "We should have helped them, and hastened our own exposure." Roberts shook his head. "Sentiment is the enemy of survival, Mr. Hayes." "What do we do with it now?" the first mate asked, eyeing the drifting vessel warily. Roberts considered for a moment. "Burn it." "Burn it?" Several voices echoed in shock. "Yes." Robert's tone allowed no argument. "If any are still alive inside, it would be mercy, and it eliminates any risk of others stumbling upon it and becoming infected." He nodded to the gunner. "Fire the guns with heated shot. Ensure it burns completely." They watched from a safe distance as the abandoned slave ship was consumed by flames. Black smoke billowed into the clear sky, visible for miles, a warning of death. As the Portuguese vessel sank, its mainmast collapsing in a shower of sparks, Roberts turned away. "Quarantine by fire," he murmured. "Most efficient." That night, alone in his cabin, he discovered his hands were shaking. He stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. These elegant, long-fingered hands that had charted courses and signed death warrants. Was it fear? Surely not. He had faced death many times without flinching. Was it the beginnings of fever? He checked his reflection anxiously, looking for the telltale yellowing of the eyes. No, it was something else. Something he couldn't name or wouldn't acknowledge. For the first time since taking command, Bartholomew Roberts reached for the bottle of brandy he kept for medicinal purposes. He poured a measure, then stopped, the glass halfway to his lips. No. Control began with the self. First a drink to steady the nerves, then what? Loud singing? Dancing on tables? He was not some common pirate. Roberts poured the brandy back into the bottle and corked it firmly. He was in control. His methods brought order. He lived by principle. He would sleep in full uniform again tonight, pistols at the ready. Tomorrow they would meet with the good fortune and replenish their crew. Operations would continue. Black Bart would endure, even as lesser men fell. But in the darkness, as the ship creaked around him, he couldn't ignore the truth any longer. He was no longer commanding men, just surviving ghosts. Chapter 6. Signal from the good fortune, Captain. The new cabin boy, Williams, a skinny 12-year-old with permanent fear in his eyes, approached Roberts hesitantly. "They're waiting 3 leagues to port." Roberts nodded without looking away from his charts. "Tell them to maintain distance until I signal. We can't risk spreading the sickness." The boy hurried away, clearly relieved to escape Roberts' presence. Most of the crew felt the same way now. The fever had claimed 23 lives in total before finally burning itself out. Among the dead were Tommy Parker and the ship's surgeon. Burning out was precisely how Roberts described it in his log. Like a forest fire that consumes all available fuel, then extinguishes itself once nothing remains to burn. Efficient, in its own terrible way. Those who survived walked the decks like ghosts, haunted by what they'd witnessed and what they'd become. The daily routines continued. Roberts insisted upon it, but the spirit was gone from their execution. Hayes entered without knocking, a breach of protocol that would have resulted in punishment weeks earlier. Now Roberts merely glanced up with mild irritation. "The Good Fortune reports a British warship was seen near Cape Lopez," Hayes said without introduction. "HMS Swallow, 60 guns. Captain Challoner Ogle commanding." Roberts straightened. "Ogle? I know that name." "You should. He's been hunting pirates in these waters for months. Word is, the Royal Navy's formed a special squadron just for us." Hayes dropped a crumpled paper on Roberts' desk. "This was distributed in the last port we raided." Roberts unfolded it to find a crude woodcut of himself, recognizable by the elaborate clothing and multiple pistols, with the words, "Wanted, Bartholomew Roberts, pirate," and a substantial reward listed below. "I've become famous," Roberts remarked dryly. "You've become a target," Hayes corrected. "The biggest in these waters. The men are concerned." Roberts studied the wanted poster. "They've captured my likeness quite well, don't you think? Though they've made my nose rather more pointed than it is." Hayes slammed his palm on the desk, rattling the inkwell. "Blast it, man. Do you not understand? They're hunting us specifically. Not just any pirates. Us." "I understand perfectly, Mr. Hayes." Robert's voice remained calm, but a dangerous edge had entered it. "The question is whether you understand what that means." "It means we should change our hunting grounds. Perhaps the American colonies, or even back to the Caribbean." Roberts shook his head. "It means we've disrupted their precious trade enough to warrant special attention. We've won, Mr. Hayes." A bitter smile spread across his face. "We've become important." He rose and moved to the window, staring out at the distant silhouette of the Good Fortune. "All my life, I've been told my place. A minor officer on a minor ship, following orders from lesser men born to better circumstances. Then, fate intervened." He touched the gold cross hanging from his neck. "Now the most powerful navy in the world considers me worthy of a personal hunt." Hayes watched him with growing concern. "The men don't share your enthusiasm for martyrdom, Captain." "Martyrdom?" Roberts turned sharply. "Is that what you think I seek?" "No, Mr. Hayes. I seek immortality, the kind that comes from being not just successful, but legendary." He returned to the desk, rolling up his charts with quick movements. "We will not run. We certainly will not hide. And we will continue operations as planned. And when the Royal Navy finds us, as they inevitably will, we will show them what true seamanship looks like. And if we're outgunned, then we die with our principles intact." Roberts met Hayes' gaze squarely. "Isn't that preferable to living as cowering rats?" Hayes didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was hollow. "The men followed you for gold, Captain, not glory." "They'll have both," Roberts promised. "Or neither." After Hayes left, Roberts examined the wanted poster again. The reward was substantial, enough to tempt any man who might consider betrayal. He would need to be vigilant. He opened his desk drawer and removed a small leather case. Inside was a collection of navigational tools, dividers, ruler, pencils arranged in perfect order. He selected a small knife used for sharpening pencils and slid it into his boot, just in case. That night, Roberts called the officers of both ships aboard the Royal Fortune for a council. They gathered in his cabin, 8 men representing what remained of his floating empire. The fever had thinned their ranks. Betrayal could finish the job. "Gentlemen," Roberts began, standing at the head of the table like a chairman addressing his board. "We find ourselves at a crossroads. The Royal Navy has taken a personal interest in our operations." He laid out the situation clinically, their current position, the reported location of HMS Swallow, the likelihood of additional warships in the area. "Some would suggest we flee," he continued. "Change our hunting grounds, perhaps even disperse and retire from our profession." His eyes swept the assembled men. I am not among them. No one spoke. The only sound was the creaking of the ship and the distant call of a night bird from the African coast. "Black Bart does not run," Roberts declared. "We have built something unprecedented, a floating kingdom more efficient and more profitable than any legitimate enterprise. We have taken over 400 ships in less than 3 years. There is enough amassed wealth to be beyond the dreams of kings." He placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. "And now, we have the opportunity to cement our legacy by defeating the very navy sent to destroy us." Hayes finally broke the silence. "How do you propose we do that, Captain?" "The Swallow carries twice our guns." "With strategy, Mr. Hayes. With discipline and coordination." Roberts straightened. "We will continue operations as planned, but with increased vigilance. At the first sighting of Ogle's ship, we will engage on our terms, not his." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. None voiced open disagreement, but their reluctance was obvious. "I understand your concerns," Roberts said, his voice softening slightly. "But consider the alternative. We scatter, and within months we are hunted down individually. We retire, and live in constant fear of recognition and arrest. Or we stand together and face whatever comes with dignity." He reached for a decanter on the shelf behind him, an unusual move that caught everyone's attention. Roberts never drank. "A toast, gentlemen," he said, pouring small measures of brandy for each officer. "To the legacy we've built, and the legend we shall become." They raised their glasses uncertainly. Roberts didn't drink from his own, merely touching it to his lips before setting it down. "Now, to the details of our strategy." The meeting continued late into the night. When it concluded, only Hayes remained behind. "You've changed, Bart," he said, using the familiar name for the first time. "The fever changed you." Roberts considered this. Perhaps it clarified things, stripped away illusions. Or maybe it killed something essential, Hayes suggested. "Something human." "Humanity is overrated, Mr. Hayes." Roberts began organizing the papers on his desk, a clear dismissal. "Especially in our line of work." Hayes moved to the door, then hesitated. "The men will follow you, Captain. They always have, but not for the reasons you think." "Oh?" "They don't follow because of your rules or your speeches about dignity. They follow because you win." Hayes' hand rested on the doorknob. "The moment that changes, the moment they believe you're leading them to destruction rather than riches, all your fine words won't save you." Roberts looked up, his expression unreadable. "Is that a threat, Mr. Hayes?" "No, Captain. Just seamanship. When the weather changes, a wise sailor adjusts his course." After Hayes departed, Roberts stood motionless for several minutes. Then he moved to the small mirror mounted on the wall, examining his reflection critically. Had he changed? Certainly he'd lost weight. They all had, after the fever depleted their provisions and their strength. But there was something else. Something in the eyes that looked back at him. A coldness that hadn't been there before. Or perhaps it had always been there, merely hidden beneath a veneer of civility and procedure. Roberts turned away from his reflection. It didn't matter. All that mattered was the course ahead, the route to legend, paved with British naval timber and Spanish gold. Black Bart would not run. Not from the Royal Navy, and not from fever or even death itself. He had rules for this rotten world, and the first was simple. Stand your ground. Chapter 7. Cape Lopez rose from the sea like a crouching beast, its forested spine dark against the dawn sky. Roberts studied it through his spyglass, automatically calculating distances and angles of approach. Good, natural harbor. Sheltered anchorage. Excellent visibility of approaching vessels. It would do. Signal the Good Fortune, he ordered. We anchor in the lee of the Cape. Maintain full watch rotations. The past weeks had been quiet, almost peaceful. No sign of HMS Swallow or other naval vessels. No fresh outbreaks of fever. They'd taken 3 small prizes without resistance, replenishing their provisions and adding modestly to their coffers. Hayes approached, his expression grim. Lookout, reports, sails on the horizon. Square, rigged. Coming in fast. Roberts didn't react immediately, continuing to study the coastline through his glass. How many? Just 1. Visible from the masthead. Interesting. Roberts finally lowered the spyglass. Not a merchant vessel, then. The men think it's Ogle. The men think many things, Mr. Hayes, most of them wrong. Roberts brushed an invisible speck from his crimson waistcoat. Nevertheless, prepare for action. Gun crews to stations. Strike all unnecessary sails. As Hayes moved to relay the orders, Roberts remained oddly still, his expression thoughtful. After months of anticipation, the confrontation was finally at hand. He should feel something. Fear, perhaps. Excitement. Instead, he felt only a cool detachment, as if observing events from a great distance. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather-bound book, his personal journal. For a moment, he considered writing a final entry, some profound reflection on his unlikely journey from a respectable navigator to pirate king. Instead, he tucked the journal back into his pocket. History would write his epitaph, one way or another. Captain! Williams, the cabin boy, rushed up breathlessly. Mr. Hayes says to tell you it's definitely a warship. British colors. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Roberts handed the boy his spyglass. Return this to my cabin, then find the drummer. Tell him to prepare to play the Admiral's March. The boy blinked in confusion. The Admiral's March, sir? Yes. We shall meet our visitors with appropriate ceremony. As Williams scurried off, the atmosphere aboard the Royal Fortune transformed. Gun crews manned their stations. Powder monkeys prepared cartridges. Fighters checked their weapons. Cutlasses, pistols, boarding axes. Roberts descended to his cabin, where he made his final preparations. He donned his finest clothes, the crimson waistcoat, black breeches, polished boots. Around his neck went the gold chain with its diamond-studded cross. Across his chest, the silk sling holding 4 loaded pistols. When he emerged onto the deck, a murmur ran through the crew. Even after all this time, Robert's theatrical flair could still impress. Hayes approached, concern etched on his weathered face. Captain, the Good Fortune is signaling. They recommend we slip anchor and make for open water, try to outrun the Swallow. The Good Fortune is commanded by men of limited vision, Roberts replied. We shall not run, Mr. Hayes. We shall stand and fight. Captain, Hayes began, then stopped, visibly gathering himself. The men are asking why we're choosing to fight when we could escape. They deserve an answer. Roberts surveyed the busy deck, where pirates who had once been slaves, deserters, and desperate men now prepared for battle with the discipline of a royal fleet. His creation, his legacy. Very well. Roberts nodded. Assemble them. The crew gathered quickly, their faces a mixture of fear, resignation, and stubborn pride. The distant sail was now visible from the deck. a white speck growing larger by the minute. Roberts stood on the quarterdeck, the morning sun illuminating him like an actor on a stage. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily across the hushed deck. "Some among you wonder why we choose to stand rather than flee. The answer is simple. We are not common thieves to scatter at the first sign of the law." He paced slowly, each movement deliberate. "We have created something unprecedented. A floating democracy, more fair than any nation, more profitable than any company. We have lived by our own rules, not those imposed by corrupt kings or grasping merchants." The crew listened in silence, many nodding despite themselves. Whatever his faults, Roberts could still command attention. "Today we face a choice. We can run, prolonging our individual lives but killing the legend we've built. Or we can stand together, showing the world that Black Bart bows to no one. Not to disease, not to storm, and certainly not to His Majesty's Navy." He drew one of his pistols, raising it high. "I choose to die, with dignity, with purpose, with lace on my cuffs, rather than live as a hunted animal. Who stands with me?" A ragged cheer went up, not universal, but substantial. "Enough." Roberts nodded in satisfaction. "To your stations, then. And remember our code. No quarter asked, none given." As the crew dispersed, Hayes remained. "Fine speech, Captain. Very theatrical. Do I detect a note of cynicism, Mr. Hayes?" "Just wondering if you believe it yourself." Hayes watched the approaching warship. All this talk of dignity and purpose. In the end, we're still just men with guns trying not to get killed. Roberts adjusted his lace cuffs with meticulous precision. "There's a difference between dying and being forgotten, Mr. Hayes. I intend to ensure the latter never happens." The British warship was close enough now to make out details. The proud lines of HMS Swallow, her gun ports open and ready. A formidable opponent, even for the well-armed Royal Fortune. "Drummer!" Roberts called. "Begin the Admiral's march." Young Williams, clutching drums nearly as large as himself, tapped out a military rhythm. The sound was unsteady. The boy could barely keep the beat, but it echoed across the water with defiant clarity. Roberts took his position on the quarterdeck, a statue-like figure in crimson and black, the embodiment of pirate legend. He drew a deep breath, savoring the salt air, the tension of imminent battle, the culmination of his unlikely journey. "Mr. Hayes," he said quietly, "whatever happens today, it has been an honor serving with you." Hayes looked surprised, then nodded gruffly. "Likewise, Captain." The Swallow was now within cannon range. At any moment, the first shot would be fired. Roberts stood immobile, facing the oncoming warship with perfect composure. He was not commanding men anymore, just ghosts. His ghosts. His legend. Black Bart would meet his fate standing. Chapter 8. The first cannonball screamed overhead, missing the Royal Fortune's mainmast by inches. The sound alone caused several pirates to duck instinctively. Not Roberts. He remained perfectly still, as if the laws of physics would respect his composure and bend around him. "Hold fire," he commanded calmly. "Let them waste their shot while we maneuver for advantage." Hayes looked doubtful, but relayed the order. The Royal Fortune began a careful turn, presenting her broadside to the approaching Swallow. 60 guns against 42. Not favorable odds, but pirates had overcome worse. "Steady," Roberts called as another British shot sent splinters flying from the forecastle. "Steady." He could see figures moving on the Swallow's deck now. Uniformed men following their own orders with rigid precision. Captain Ogle would be there somewhere, perhaps watching Roberts through a spyglass just as Roberts observed him. 2 captains, 2 codes, 2 visions of order on the chaotic sea. "Prepare to fire," Roberts ordered, his voice still conversational. "Aim for their masts. I want them disabled, not sunk." The gun crews tensed, ready for the command. The atmosphere on deck was electric, fear and excitement crackling between the men like static before a storm. Roberts raised his hand, waiting for the perfect moment when the Swallow's broadside came into optimal range. Fire. The command was drowned by the thunderous roar of cannon. The Royal Fortune shuddered as her guns belched flame and iron, sending a deadly volley toward the British warship. Through the billowing smoke, Roberts watched with professional detachment as several shots found their mark, splintering the Swallow's foremast and tearing holes in her sails. A cheer went up from the pirates. First blood to Black Bart. But the celebration was premature. The Swallow answered with her own broadside, a devastating wall of iron that slammed into the Royal Fortune with terrible power. Wood shattered. Men screamed. The ship listed sharply as water began pouring through multiple hull breaches. Roberts gripped the railing to steady himself, but his expression remained unchanged. "Damage report," he called, as if requesting the day's weather. Haze appeared through the smoke, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "Lower gun deck hit badly. At least 6 dead. We're taking on water. Pump crews to stations. Prepare another broadside." Roberts straightened his waistcoat with one hand and signaled the Good Fortune to engage from the windward side. But the Good Fortune had already fled, abandoning her sister ship to face the Swallow alone. Roberts watched her retreating form with a flicker of contempt. "Predictable," he murmured. The Swallow was maneuvering for another attack, her superior crew working with practiced efficiency to bring her guns to bear again. On the Royal Fortune, chaos was spreading. Men abandoned their posts to help wounded comrades, or, in some cases, to prepare for escape. "Return to stations!" Hayes bellowed, trying to restore order. "Stand fast!" Roberts observed it all with a strange detachment. This was not how he had imagined the final confrontation. In his mind, it had been a noble last stand, disciplined pirates fighting to the end against overwhelming odds. The reality was messier, more human, fear, overwhelming training. Survival instinct trumping principle. "Captain!" Williams called. The boy's face streaked with gunpowder. "The carpenter says we can't hold much longer." Roberts nodded acknowledgement. "Tell him to focus on keeping us afloat long enough to grapple the Swallow. We'll board her and settle this with steel." It was a desperate plan, but the pirates rallied to it. Boarding was their strength, close quarters fighting where their ferocity could overcome naval discipline. The Swallow's second broadside hit with even greater devastation than the first. A direct hit on the Royal Fortune's powder magazine was narrowly avoided, but the destruction was still immense. The main deck became a charnel house of splintered wood and broken men. Through it all, Roberts remained on the quarterdeck, a statue-like figure in his crimson waistcoat and powdered wig. He might have been reviewing a military parade rather than standing amid the apocalypse of naval battle. "Prepare grappling hooks," he ordered. "On my command, we'll close distance and board." Hayes stared at him incredulously. "Half the crew is dead or wounded. We can barely keep the ship afloat." "Then the decision is simpler, isn't it?" Roberts replied. "Forward or down? I choose forward." Before Hayes could respond, the Swallow fired again. This time, they loaded with grape shot, hundreds of small metal balls that swept the Royal Fortune's deck like a lethal hailstorm. The first volley missed Roberts entirely. The second caught him in the throat. There was no dramatic stagger, no last words, no grand gesture. One moment, Black Bart stood tall and imperious. The next, he collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, blood spurting from his severed throat arteries. Hayes reached him first, cradling the fallen captain as he convulsed. Robert's eyes were wide with shock, not at the pain, but at the indignity. This was not how legends died. This was messy, ignoble, common. He tried to speak, but only a wet gurgle emerged. His fingers clutched at his throat. then at Hayes's shirt, leaving crimson handprints on the fabric. "Easy, Captain," Hayes murmured. "Easy now." Around them, the battle was ending. With Roberts fallen, the remaining pirates lost what discipline they had maintained. Some threw down their weapons. Others jumped overboard, preferring to take their chances with the sea. Roberts' eyes glazed. With his last strength, he reached for his pocket for the journal, Hayes realized. His legacy. His final words. "I'll make sure they know," Hayes promised, though he wasn't certain Roberts could still hear him. About the rules, the dignity, all of it. A flicker of something. Gratitude. Relief. Crossed Roberts' face. Then his body went slack, the light fading from his eyes. Black Bart was dead. Hayes gently closed his captain's eyes, then stood to face the approaching British Marines. The Royal Fortune was sinking beneath them, the deck already awash with seawater tinged pink by blood. "What about the body?" one of the surviving pirates asked, nodding toward Roberts. Hayes remembered the captain's own strict rule, no proper burial for pirates, lest their graves become shrines. Bodies were to be disposed of at sea, quickly and without ceremony. "Over the side," Hayes ordered, as he would have wanted, by the articles. 4 men lifted Roberts' corpse. For a moment, it seemed the sea itself paused to receive him. Then they heaved, and Black Bart, the gentleman pirate, the man who had taken more prizes than any other in the Golden Age, slipped beneath the waves in a swirl of crimson. His body vanished immediately, drawn down by the weight of his weapons and the golden cross around his neck. No dramatic floating, just gone. As the British sailors swarmed aboard the sinking ship, Hayes surrendered without resistance. It was over. The legend had ended with Roberts' messy, sudden death, just like any other man. Chapter 9. 3 weeks later, in the naval office at Cape Coast Castle, Lieutenant Gordon of HMS Swallow completed his official report on the death of Bartholomew Roberts. "The pirate Roberts," he wrote in neat script, "was killed instantly by grape shot to the throat. Death was quick. The body was disposed of at sea by the pirates themselves before we could recover it." He paused, considering whether to elaborate. There was more to the story, of course. The strange dignity with which Roberts had faced battle, the elaborate costume he'd worn, the almost fanatical devotion of his crew even after his fall. But such details had no place in an official report. The Admiralty wanted facts, not impressions. The pirate was dead, his ship sunk, his crew captured or scattered, mission accomplished. Gordon dipped his quill again and added, "No significant artifacts were recovered, except these." He gestured to a small box on his desk, containing the only physical remnants of Black Bart, a pair of lace cuffs, somehow separated from his coat during the battle and found floating on the water afterward. Finishing the report, Gordon sealed it with wax and set it aside for dispatch to London. Then he opened a personal letter to his brother, a naval historian with an interest in piracy. "You asked about Roberts," he began. "He was not what I expected. The men speak of him with a mixture of fear and respect even now. He ran his ship like a royal flagship, with rules for everything from gambling to bedtimes. Can you imagine? A pirate with a curfew." Gordon described the battle briefly, but focused more on what he'd learned afterward from the captured pirates, about Roberts' insistence on cleanliness, his abstention from alcohol, his mandatory Sunday services while wearing a stolen bishop's mitre. Most curious of all, Gordon wrote, was his response to the fever that swept his ship. The men say he watched crewmates die without emotion, yet insisted on strict quarantine procedures that likely saved many lives. A contradiction, ruthless yet protective in his own cold way. He concluded, "I suspect the legend of Black Bart will grow with time, though perhaps not as he would have wished. Already the stories change with each telling. The pirates we executed yesterday died cursing his name, or calling upon it like a saint, depending on how they viewed his leadership. By next year, who knows what tales will be told of him in taverns from Jamaica to Guinea. Gordon sealed this letter as well, then turned to the small box containing Robert's lace cuffs. After a moment's consideration, he locked them in his desk drawer, rather than sending them to London as evidence. A small souvenir of an unusual encounter. Outside his window, a new generation of pirates was already taking to the seas, men who had heard of Black Bart's exploits and his dramatic end. But they took different lessons from his story. The new intake drank heavily, swore constantly. They scorned rules and discipline, and most of them died quickly, caught by naval patrols or felled by disease or killed by their own kind in drunken disputes. None achieved a fraction of Robert's success. The legend faded faster than anyone might have expected. Within a decade, Black Bart was just another name in the list of Golden Age pirates, remembered more for his fancy clothes than his revolutionary organization. The real Bartholomew Roberts, the contradiction who craved order in chaos, who built a corporate empire of crime, who saw both efficiency and cruelty as tools of control, vanished beneath the waves just as surely as his physical body had. In the end, perhaps that was a fitting epitaph for the gentleman pirate. All style, no substance, remembered for his fashion rather than his fearsome discipline. Black Bart would have hated it, which made it perfect. Author's note. Now, what really happened? Quite a lot, actually. Bartholomew Roberts was real, and he was exactly the infuriatingly competent man this world never quite knows what to do with. Born in Wales, he was press-ganged into piracy in 1719, and within 6 weeks, he'd been elected captain of the ship that captured him. Yes, 6 weeks. That part's real. He did indeed refuse to drink alcohol, ran his ship on a strict set of articles, and was famously well-dressed. Waistcoat, powdered wig, lace cuffs, the works. He took over 400 ships in just under 3 years, making him one of the most successful pirates of the so-called Golden Age. If you'd never heard of him until now, don't feel bad. History tends to forget the ones who preferred clean shirts. His death? Spot on. He was killed by grape shot in the throat during battle with HMS Swallow, and his crew threw his body overboard before the British could recover it, exactly as he'd ordered. As for the rest, well, that's where the storytelling comes in. There's no record of Tommy Parker, of course, though men like him absolutely existed. Hayes is a blend of a few historical figures and a voice of conscience Bart might have ignored in real life. I took liberties with the timing of events, the personality clashes, and the quiet horror of command. I can't prove Roberts ever wore a stolen bishop's mitre for Sunday services, but honestly, does it feel that far-fetched? This story isn't here to replace your history book. It's here to make the margins feel alive. If it sparked curiosity, that's my job done. Black Bart lived by rules in a world that despised them. He was brilliant, brutal, deeply odd, and if he's remembered more for his clothes than his code, well, he'd hate that. Which makes it all the more fitting. He wasn't a nice man. He was a pirate, and during his short, violent life, he made enough waves, pun absolutely intended, to deserve to be remembered. If you enjoyed this story, please consider leaving a review at the store where you bought this. Every kind word helps a pirate find their sea legs. Historical side effects disclaimer. Black Bart edition. This story is for entertainment purposes only. Reader discretion is advised if you are allergic to powdered wigs, maritime arrogance, or unsolicited poetry during piracy. Side effects may include sudden British accents, compulsive monologuing, unrealistic hat standards, chronic disdain for rum-swilling pirates, and the urge to enforce shipboard dress codes mid-heist. Use of this story may lead to delusions of naval grandeur, the spontaneous formation of pirate constitutions, and a strong moral code accompanied by armed robbery. Not suitable for readers who prefer their outlaws grubby and incoherent. Black Bart may cause sartorial envy, mild swooning, or severe side-eye from historians of piracy. If symptoms include rhyming threats, quoting scripture while plundering, or excessive swagger on the high seas, You may have been exposed to gentleman pirate syndrome. There is no known cure, only silk. Please do not attempt to enforce maritime law with feathered hats. Side effects may also include execution at sea and posthumous over-romanticization. This story contains no buried treasure, just buried irony.